everyone, and welcome to my overview on leukemia. Today I will be giving an overview over the various types of leukemia, what kind of pathways they involve, and what cells they affect, as well as some of the latest advancements we've made in treatment for these diseases. So leukemia is a term you don't often hear just by itself. You hear of different types of leukemia, different words like, for instance, we got the acute myeloid leukemia, or AML, and also we have chronic lymphocytic leukemia, or CLL. So what are some of the differences between these types of leukemia? How do we differentiate between them? So I went ahead and just drew out a simple diagram here of what we go through whenever we diagnose leukemia. So first, we're looking at whether it's involving lymphoid tissue or myeloid tissue. And for those of you who don't remember, the lymphoid tissue differentiates into the T killer cells, the B lymphocytes, the T lymphocytes, while the myeloid cells differentiate into erythrocytes, neutrophils, monocytes, macrophages, and those sort of cells. So to be able to determine what type of leukemia is affecting a patient, we have to determine what type of cell is involved. So if we see a bunch of, say, immature T lymphocytes, then we'll know that it's taken this pathway and it's a lymphoid leukemia. Next, the way we differentiate it is whether it's chronic or acute. So down here, I went ahead and wrote out a kind of a simple description of what an acute leukemia would look like. For this one, it's going to involve the hematopoietic blast cell at the very top of the differentiation whenever you have the stem cells. So this one is very poorly differentiated. It didn't go very far in the differentiation pathway, maturing into either a myeloid or a lymphocytic cell. And you're just going to see basically an overcrowding of these immature blastocytic cells. They can be either myeloid or lymphoid again. And it's going to lead to basically just overcrowding the rest of your blood cells and stealing resources from the rest of them so that they're not able to do their jobs as well as they used to. And these cells, they're very young and immature. They don't have much specialization. They don't really do anything for the body. So next up, we're going to look at the chronic types of leukemias. These ones, they affect cells further down the pathway of differentiation. So we got the hematopoietic blast cell again, and it's going to differentiate into the myoblast and lymphoblast, and then from there it might differentiate further into the lymphocytic cell before it differentiates into T lymphocytes, and it's just going to keep reproducing from there uncontrollably. And these cells will look more like their end product, what they're supposed to look like, but ultimately they're still not completely mature and still not able to carry out the functions as they're supposed to. Also, I'd like to comment that the acute types of leukemia you're more often going to see in the younger populations. These ones tend to affect people at the very beginning of life, and they can be, they spread quickly. The symptoms start abruptly, and they're more often fatal for that reason. Whereas with the chronic leukemias, these ones you're going to see more often in our older patients. They're not nearly as lethal as an acute type of leukemia would be. They sort of just spread more slowly, and oftentimes they don't even require treatment because chemotherapy can do more damage than good in these sorts of cases. So acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL, is the most common type of childhood leukemia. Again, it's one of those acute forms of leukemia where it affects cells at the earlier stage. And chronic lymphocytic leukemia is the most common type of leukemia in adults. and overall the most common type of leukemia in general. As far as lethality goes, it's going to be over in affecting these myeloid leukemias, the acute myeloid leukemia, or AML. It's definitely the most deadly type from what I've been reading, and it can be pretty rapid onset, pretty lethal. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about what we're talking about with the different forms of leukemia, let's go over some of the most latest forms of treatment they have for each type. So let's start with the AML, or acute myeloid leukemia. Now this one, it has this variant that we're going to see most often called the M3 variant. And basically what it means is that it's got a higher concentration of this enzyme called myeloperoxidase. And if you look at the cells, you'll actually see these things called hour rods, which I'll put a picture here for you to see. And it's the defining characteristic of this type of leukemia. So the treatment for it is actually vitamin A, or ATRA, in this form. And basically it's just going to inhibit this enzyme and slow down the progression of this form. The next one we'll go over is the chronic myeloid leukemia, or CML. So this one is most often caused by a translocation on one of the chromosomes. In order to prevent this sort of translocation from happening, we have a special drug called imatinib. And basically it works by just inhibiting this translocation from occurring by, I believe, also inhibiting another special enzyme in the process of this. So our next one is going to be acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL. This is the most lethal form of leukemia, just a reminder. So for this form, its defining characteristic is this TDT plus enzyme, and basically our best form of treatment for it is this med called cytarabine, or ARA-C. And this is a typical chemotherapeutic drug. It basically works by slowing metabolism of the leukemic cells, and it's going to affect systemic wide as well. Lastly, we have the chronic lymphocytic leukemia, or CLL, and for this form, it's one of the ones that's slower proliferating, that we most commonly see in older adults, and it's generally not very lethal. So most of the time, doctors aren't going to want to prescribe any sort of treatment or drugs or anything for it. Because chemotherapy is very hard on these people, and it's probably going to do more harm than good in this case. So doctors typically won't do anything for this form. They'll monitor the patient, and if symptoms get increasingly worse, if they have a lot of blast cells appear in the blood in a short amount of time, then they might consider putting the patient on some form of chemotherapy, but generally they don't want to do it in this form. Well, everyone, that's it for my overview on leukemia and the different forms it can take on. I hope that everybody was able to learn something new from today and what we've gone over. I have to admit that I myself had no idea leukemia could take these different forms. I thought it was just the one illness for so many years. So going over this whole thing has been pretty enlightening for me also. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and does well out there.